Good afternoon. Welcome to Book Lovers Corner for the 23rd of February 2021. Second Book Lovers Corner for this year. And I'd like to thank those who have done all the mihi for the last several months as I've been away. So thank you, Steve. Thank you, Gareth. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Sue up on the Waiheke. And thanks to Lily Rapson, who came in as well. It's been a great pleasure reading or listening to on YouTube all our past Book Lovers Corners for the last few months. So thank you.
Very welcome, Valda.
Well,
But we did miss you.
Well, here we are, back in style again. We're being broadcast on the Wairarapa Community Access radio station, Arrow FM 92.7, and we do this every fourth Tuesday of the month, 3:30 to 4:30, throughout the year. Arrow FM is one of 12 community radio stations in the country, and we're sponsored by Elmo's Books. Thanks very much to Steve. And Elmo's is our wonderful independent bookshop in Carterton. You can listen to the program live here on Arrow FM or on the Wairarapa Community Access Community TV Freeview Channel 41, or you can actually download it as a podcast from Arrow FM website or listen on YouTube, which is how I listened to the previous 3 or 4 months. We'd appreciate any feedback, and so if you've got any, contact the station's Facebook page, or even Elmo's Facebook page, maybe.
Yeah, and we didn't put last time's quality effort up because the television quality wasn't too good, but we'll put the today's result up on our Facebook page.
Great.
So people can find that as well if they like.
And every month we listen to Steve's sister Sue, who used to be part of our team till last year, and she now inhabits Waiheke Island, and so she reports from afar. From a distant isle, from a far isle, and so we look forward to her notes every month. So thanks very much to Sue, who keeps us in touch with what's happening on Waiheke, and I think Gareth will add to comments about what he's been reading about Waiheke in the recent days. So without more of ado, Gareth and Steve, welcome. And Steve, would you like to head off with, what's coming out of Elmo's and any books that have, you found interesting this past month? Yeah,
just a passing comment on the book trade. It continues to be in pretty good health worldwide. Book sales are well up in the UK. I guess there's not much else you can do there if you can find a book. And we're continuing to do pretty well in New Zealand, it may be a long-term result of the 7 weeks when people had nothing much else to do here as well.
Is a supply issue being sorted?
Yeah, it's patchy, and for the new titles, most things are still turning up within a week or two of when we expect them, except for the things that they just say, well, we know we sold you this for March, but it's not coming till September now because we couldn't get them on a ship out of the UK, or they wouldn't print them in Hong Kong, or whatever. It's still pretty challenging for special orders. People come in and say, I want a copy of something or other, and we can find it and we know where it comes from, but it's still taking 4 or 5 weeks for those sorts of things to come.
Do our local publishers do they go offshore to get it printed, or are they printing it here? I mean, is it their time now?
I don't know for a fact, but I'm pretty sure that almost everything is still printed offshore. It's just pure cost. New Zealand printers have a bit of an edge if someone wants 500 copies of something, but an example, is the Searching for Charlie, where Upstart, that was the Charles Upham biography, Tom Scott's book, where Upstart printed 20,000, sold those in a few weeks, which they didn't really expect, and then it was a long time before they could get any more in hardback at a price that would enable anybody to buy it, so that had to come from overseas. So it's still... And talk to people in all walks of life about getting things, bits for your car or new dishwasher or buttons for your whatever. It's all sorts of things are going to be a challenge this year.
But in the bookshop, it seems like there's a range of new titles. It seems it's so that works. I mean, is it enough customers wandering in the door through the door? And
oh yeah. And the Wairarapa continues to be, I think, a bit of a beneficiary of the fact that people can't go offshore. So we've still got more visitors than we're accustomed to.
Right.
And again, locals, they can't spend much money on their overseas holidays either. So.
Well, I mean, for example, in 2 weeks' time, I've got my eldest nephew's coming up with his wife and 2 kids for a friend's 50th birthday, and they'll be based in Greytown. I'm looking after the kids for the weekend, and we'll be coming into Elmo's and looking for, because they did particularly well last year, and one's transitioning to high school, and the other one got sort of top of his year for the second year in a row. So we'll be coming in to sort of look for books or get book vouchers, whichever they prefer. So that's an example of people coming in from out of town and having an independent bookshop around that, is really works.
You could sell them that diary.
The Disappointments Diary.
The Disappointments Diary. They need to, have a little touch of realism in their life.
Yeah, makes a great gift. But, and it's a reasonable diary. It's a diary it's a perpetual diary, but it's some diaries will have a list of, on any given day, the people who were born. This is a list of the people who died on that particular day. And it has for every week it has a particularly depressing quote. There's one comes to mind, says something: "It's always darkest just before the dawn of another pointless day." So,
right, which takes us into much more interesting things. Has anything interesting come into the shop, please, Steve?
Yeah, I just thought I'd mention this in passing. So this book will be published in May. It's called China. It's the new...
Yep, brilliant.
Okay.
Yep.
This was Debbie's idea that I brought the little book stand rather than wave things.
I think it's excellent, actually.
So Edward Rutherford, Serum, he's written a whole series of enormous books. This is his first one for a while. And
you look at the size of it, it's not surprising.
Well, yeah.
Well researched too, I would imagine.
I was just talking to the Hachette rep about this yesterday, and she said she'd sent me a copy. And so this is China, and I was thinking, wow, Edward Rutherford, History of China, that's going to be 25,000 pages. It is in fact only 700, but he missed out the first couple of thousand years. So this runs from 1839 till the beginning of the 19th century, which is a period we can kind of relate to. So that's Boxer Revolution.
But it's a novel,
China.
isn't it?
It's a novel, yeah.
But he does it in such an engaging way that you really get caught up in the story.
Yeah. No, I think, as I say, it's only just arrived. It'll probably take me till May to read it. So sometime between now and then I'll let you know what I thought of it. But I'm quite impressed. And it's an example of the books that are coming. The first couple of months of the year are generally a little bit of, I wouldn't say a desert, but the publishers generally go all out, get the big titles into the bookshops by November, and then not much happens again till March. But another book I do want to talk about, this book is called City of Vengeance. It's a first novel by a writer called D.V. Bishop, who turns out to be David Bishop, who has made a career as a screenwriter. And this is an example of what we might call historical crime. So this is set in Florence in 1536, during the time when the Medici were running the place. And the Macmillan rep, who kindly sent me this one, said they were kind of after the C.J. Sansom market. Now, I mentioned that to you, C.J. Sansom, and neither of you knew who he was.
No.
So at Olmos, we've sold C.J. Sansom consistently for over 10 years, and Sue had read the early ones before we ever got involved in the bookshop. So those are crime thrillers set in an historical context. I think that the first and most notable example of this sort of what we might call a genre is probably The Name of the Rose, Umberto Eco's first book, which was a crime thriller set in a monastery. Eco's a little more literary. He was full of allusions to things. I mean, his hero was William of Baskerville, which is clearly a bit of a nod to Arthur Conan Doyle. C.J. Sansom is well worth reading. So his main man is Matthew Shardlake, who was a lawyer, a hunchbacked lawyer, in a time when you really need to be pretty fit to survive. And he was Thomas Cromwell's fixer. So whenever Cromwell wanted some nefarious task using the wiles of a of a tricky London lawyer to sort out, he'd get Matthew Shardlake to go and sort it out. There's a series of those books set from, the first one's called Dissolution, which is about the dissolution of the monasteries. They run through to the death of Henry VIII, which was in Lamentation, which was really about people smuggling copies of the Bible in English into England, which would get you executed. And the thing about the Sansom novels is that they're incredibly atmospheric and give you a really good idea of what it must have been like to live in a time when, on any given day, when you got up in the morning, you had to sniff the wind and decide what it was safe to say to people, because depending on how Henry felt on any day and who he'd been talking to, you would either get promoted to the Lord of the Bedchamber or you'd get burnt at the stake. So that's, and the reason I like these historical crime is because they're set in a time and they're generally well described. This particular book, say, set in Florence, so if anybody's been there, most people have wandered across the Ponte Vecchio or seen it, not realising that back in the Medici times that's where the butcher shops were.
That's right.
And they put
and all the things went into the river.
Yeah, it was a very convenient way to deal with things. And in this
all
particular book, all sorts of things go in the river, including some people. This is not quite as not quite so much a detective story as the Umberto Eco, The Name of the Rose, or the C.J. Sansoms. It's got a bit of a hint of the Jack Reacher Lee Child about it, because his protagonist Cesare Aldo is a policeman who was a soldier. I'll read you the first paragraph because it gives you a sense of it. It's very short. It says, Cesare Aldo took no pleasure from killing, but sometimes it was necessary.
Oh, well.
And oddly, it's the only book I've ever read where the last paragraph is exactly the same as the first.
How intriguing.
So it's an interesting picture of Florence in the 16th century. There are a couple of murders. The stories sort of intertwine. A little bit complicated by the fact that our friend Cesare, in fact, is gay, in a time when that emerges fairly early on.
That adds a whole dimension.
But at a time when if they found out you were gay, they would kind of, cut your head off, burn you, and then toss you into the Arno.
Yeah.
So then, you had to be a little careful. So I think it's a great book, races along, and we've just got it, so it's
excellent.
Okay, so
and so that brings again, Sue, I would imagine, would love that.
I think so.
She's into historical fiction, and in her notes from afar out this month, she talks about 4 books by a guy called Toby Clements. And
who I happen to have one here.
And, well, yep, brilliant. So there are 4 books, and they're called a Kingmaker series: Winter Pilgrims, Broken Faith, Divided Souls, and Kingdom Come. And they're centre on the lives of Catherine and Thomas, who have escaped from a religious life, a crime in those days, but one has also assaulted a nobleman, and who went on to become swept up in the periodic fighting that dominated this period. And the story moves from England to France and back, and from battle to battle, as armies of Henry VI and Edward IV slog it out, with Warwick, the Kingmaker, playing one off against the other. And so Thomas develops a skill as an archer, Catherine as a healer, and between the wars they managed to set up a home and establish a family. And Sue's comment was, "Terrific stuff and good to read books told from a point of view of the ordinary person rather than the nobles. The level of historical detail is impressive and the battle scenes are amazing. I learnt a lot about 15th century weapons and warfare." And so these fit in very much in towards the time that you were talking about in Cesare Older's books. But no, that was set in Italy.
Yeah,
whereas this is
Wars of the Roses. Those was earlier, about a century earlier, probably.
15th century. Yeah.
Yeah.
Not set in Tudor times, but for a change, but during the Wars of the Roses, when houses of York and Lancaster. But you see, I'm not a history buff, whereas you and Sue certainly is. And I think probably you are too, Gareth.
Not so much.
Not so much. No. She also mentioned another book called The Four Winds by Kristen Hanna.
Yeah, now this is probably the first of the significant novels or works of fiction we've had this year, because Kristen Hanna is a reasonably prolific and pretty well regarded novelist.
So and it's also well enjoyed by Sue. It's a story of set in the Dust Bowl of the prairies, also in California. But as soon as I read that, I immediately thought of the Grapes of Wrath and how depressing that was. And I mean, I can remember reading it, I think, in the 5th form or something, for school cert or something like that. One August holidays with the rain teeming down, and I couldn't have think of anything more depressing. And but obviously, while she's, Sue said she read it, enjoyed it. She said it's a story of love and friendship and of the strength of one woman in the face of enormous odds. But I love the sort of damned with faint praise. Not a challenging read by any means, and some will find it inspiring. But I think I got a bit tired of the overwhelming difficulty of it all. But I guess that's what happens in a depression. Well, it's how I felt about the Grapes of Wrath. You just get so damn depressing.
Yeah, when you're trying to sell your produce for threepence halfpenny and then your farm dries up and blows away, and there's not wonderful times.
But there are people who would enjoy that, I would imagine.
Well, there's a lot of misery memoirs going on. I mean, I think you're going to talk about OA later. That's pretty miserable.
Well,
I always remember Henry Fonda in the movie.
Yeah.
I mean, they had worked
Yeah.
once they left Oklahoma and they were heading west. The story picked up. It's not that.
well,
not
and
bad.
I remember oranges figured
Yeah, the orange
significantly.
groves, yeah.
Yeah, once you get to
Once you get to
California,
California.
not many oranges in Oklahoma.
No. And then the third book that Sue has mentioned is Jane Smiley, who's a Pulitzer Prize-winning author, Strays of Paris, and it's a charming novel about a horse, a dog, 2 ducks and a crow, and a small boy who live with their ancient grandmother in central Paris. The animals all talk to each other, people are kind to each other, and the animals and human friendships develop as the cold weather of Christmas develops. And she said it's funny and a charming book about friendship and freedom, by no means saccharine or sentimental, and it was a great pleasure to read. So once again, Sue, thank you for your recommendations.
Yeah, I got the impression that I haven't actually read it, but the Jane Smiley book seemed to have been told in the first person by the horse.
Oh.
Yeah, no, that's so. But hey, Waiheke is in the wind because the February edition of the North South magazine, lo and behold, there was an article on Waiheke Island, which I took notes because we need to sort of put Sue into perspective. You know, we always sort of have her placed in a hammock, and you know, it's the playground of the Auckland wealthy. But apparently, that's only part of the story. That there are a lot of contrasts between the rich and the not so rich. 12 nautical miles from the centre of Auckland. The locals are about 8,000, which makes it bigger than Greytown, smaller than Carterton. Swells.
No. It's bigger than either.
No, 8,000 permanent, and it swells to 30,000 during the season.
Carterton's population's about 5. It's over 8 if you count the rest of the district. But
Okay.
Yeah.
And apparently 300 local boats are sort of always moored in a movement. The article said a true Waiheke Islander has been described as someone who can enter an empty room and get an argument going. So I don't know if that's so.
Yep.
But
Well, you would know.
and there are a lot of pensioners, tick that box, who live there. There are a lot of alternative lifestylers who've ended up on Waiheke. And decades ago, apparently, single income householders, historically, you know, solo mothers were sent there because of the cheap rents of the place.
Oh.
And it says there are many modest houses on the island and many well-loved gardens. Is very much it. And it's a sort of place of it's meant to be. They're working on big predator-free marine reserves. Apparently, it's got a terrifically large library.
Yeah, Sue's often comment positively on the library.
Right, yeah, and that's part of Auckland Central. You know, with Chloe Swarbrick, is it? Is there?
She'll be the MP.
Yeah,
Yeah.
she's the MP, and it's.
I'm not sure Sue voted for her.
Right, yeah. Well, we hope she did, but the and it definitely it's not. You don't
In fact, I
call
do know.
you don't call them Wahetians. And the last point the article made was local time is 10 minutes late, maybe 15. Does that fit with Sue? Is she a punctual?
Oh no, she's always on time.
Oh, okay. Anyway,
But it's really interesting in recent times on the TV. There have been little snippets about the unhoused on Waiheke and people living in caravans and
So I saw
whatever
that
around.
up, yeah.
Yeah, so I think it's not without sort of the problems that the rest of New Zealand are experiencing in terms of housing and unemployment and that sort of thing, poverty.
I told you that quiz question I read the other day was, what's New Zealand's third most populous island? And you kind of think, oh, it must be Stewart Island or Chatham's or something. But it is, of course, Waiheke. Even without the extra 30,000 people rocking up.
There you go. Anyway, good work, Sue.
Yeah, so thanks, Sue. Would you like to, Gareth, look at one of your books
Sure.
before we play some music?
Right, and for a start, we have this: The Dark is Light Enough. Now, I've seen that book in the the bookshop?
Yes.
And does it sell?
Yes, absolutely.
So there is an audience out there. I mean, it's, in my reaction, I can see why this book would sell, because firstly, it's written by Vincent O'Sullivan. I mean, he is apparently he was asked in about 2005 to write the book. And Vincent is a poet, a novelist, a biographer, critic,
poet laureate, I think, wasn't he?
Yeah, playwright. He's an editor. He was the professor of English at Victoria University. He now lives in Dunedin. Won 6 national book awards. So he's the guy if you're going to have a biography written. And there were years of research, conversations with him. And so we get a very, very vivid portrait of Ralph Hotary, who lived from 1931 to 2013. It's the story of Rakura, who became Rao, who became Ralph, and he lived in Miti Miti on the edge of the Hokianga when he grew up as a child. Early art training in Auckland's Teacher Training College. 1952 washed up in Dunedin School of Art, but then moved on and became the art schools advisor in the Bay of Islands. 1961, the big move, the big change in his life, he won a fellowship to England to study in France. Stayed there for 4 years, it was a 1-year deal. 4 years later, rocks back, set up a New Zealand exhibition, and he was on his way. There are literary elements in his work, from Bill Manahire and Honi Tafari. Was it how would you say that?
Tufare.
Yeah. Who figure a lot in his work. Lots of unusual materials, corrugated iron. He became the black colour, owns black in New Zealand art. But what's interesting in this book here is his relationships with, I think, 3 wives. And he told these wives that art came first and they would come second, and that was always made clear. And he kind of they sort of approached him. He never sort of pursued these women to be their wives, but they somehow got into his life, and they became married, and they supported him. They were teachers. Cilla McQueen, the poet. She would work, so she would be interested artistically in the art life and all that. But these women, they ran his life. They were the secretary. They had regular work, and paid all the bills.
Perfect women.
Well, he built. We get into that a little bit. Anyway, he became the Maori art modernist painter, dark and moody. Most of us have seen the great installation that was at Auckland Airport there for a while, so if we were coming home we would see this big Hotary. And it was kind of words and art installations, and it was a great combo. Now, why it took so long to actually come out, it's 8 years now, and apparently, once again, a North-South review in the North-South magazine said there were legal disagreements between the estate and the family that had to be resolved. There's no art in the book. You'll have to Google that if you want to find it. It's terrifically well written, and it's just a great case of where a novelist can make actually a well-engaging biography, and I can see why it would sell well. Then really to finish, Hotary's reputation as an enigmatic, and he refused to explain his work. And there's a great quote in here. It says, "Many painters profess this, but this is of a rare one who can actually shut up." Because once you talk to a painter, once you've got them going, you can't stop them. But talking about, even though they say I can't discuss my work, but in fact,
are you a painter, Gareth?
Oh yeah, and I'll talk about it so that But anyway, Hotary was very determined to be an artist. Today, this is kind of like an outrageous proposition or ambition, but back then, it was just unheard of. relationships, another case of the heroic male artist disregarding the effect of his mission on those around him, and the couples that were devoted to him are well documented. But Hauteri's commitment to the pub, the golf course, fishing, it's
aside from his art.
yeah, it was first Ralph, and as the North-South article said, it's clear that his partners never stood a chance. So
could you put that on the stand, please, in the middle between you two?
okay, there we go. The
Oops.
yeah.
Fantastic.
So excellent art book, and Vincent's at his best. In fact, I prefer Vincent Sullivan writing non-fiction. That's I think his terrific strength, and this is a wonderful example of a significant New Zealand artist, and it was beautifully done.
Fantastic. Thanks, Gareth. Well, we might sort of stop for a bit of music now.
For the Thin White Duke.
Right down. I don't know a book from Countdown. I don't know which shadow gets me. All I've got is someone's face. Can I see the family smile? Can I reach tomorrow? Can I walk a missing mile? Can I feel? Can I please? I can't reach it anymore. I just sit back and ignore. I just can't seem to get it right. I can't reach it. I can't reach it. Money goes to money heaven. Bodies go to body hell. I sit back and catch the chase. Switch the channel, watch the police cars.
That was the Ice Storm. Ice Storm. David Bowie, I Can't Read. So appropriate for a Book Lovers Corner program. Welcome back to Arrow FM 92.7, and we welcome today, as often, Gareth and Steve and myself, Valda Kirkwood. And I think that, Gareth, you're going to talk about another book now?
Very quickly, just The Devil in the Dark Water by Stuart Thurton. The historical thriller fiction, and it's in our theme of looking at historical detectives. It's 1634. Samuel Pepys, the world's greatest detective, who's had a lot of success in Europe, who's washed up in the Batavia or something or other they call
Batavia,
that's right. That's where the book begins, and he's been transported from the Dutch East Indies to Amsterdam to face charges of treason. His loyal bodyguard, who's going to be the central character, is Arent Hayes, who's going to be, because our head detective is incarcerated on the boat, which limits him.
That's careless of him.
For a while. But Arent will be on the job. The passengers are nobles. It's full of sort of wealthy citizens and a big crew, huge boat, in a fleet that's leaving. Devilry begins to blight the voyage, and can Arent solve the mystery? And it's kind of like it's rationality and clear thinking versus superstition and fear of the times, which swirled around in that time of on history. Page-turning mystery, epic scale. It's got a great plot, mind-bending. It's intricate, pretty intelligent, I thought. Glorious, grisly cast of characters, and it's got that great situation, the mystery of the murder in the locked room. Classic sort of Agatha Christie, and many, many other writers have presented that to us, and we've got our one right in the heart of this book. And on the cover it says it's a mashup. And I think it's a terrific term, really, and it's kind of like it's a mixture of Robert Louis Stevenson's Treasure Island, Hispaniola, Out We Go, Looking for Adventure, Arthur Conan Doyle's detective story, William Golding's Lord of the Flies. They're going to land on an island. Adventures are going to happen there. People who are fans of Michael Bay movies are going to be really like this sort of thing. And it's also, think Pirates of the Caribbean and Johnny Depp, those sort of type figures. It's a huge mix of these, and really it's just great fun. And that's why I'd give it a great big tick and point you towards it.
And thank you. If you could shift it across to you a bit, it's the logo for the Times, the Wairarapa TV is overcasting it.
Valda, you seem to have a pile of
Well, I've got a pile because while I have been laid up with my leg up for most of the last couple of months, I'm now into my almost 2 weeks off my third month of non-weight bearing on my left leg. I have much of that time haven't had the concentration to read, actually, because it takes all your energy just to sort of get up and get showered and get your breakfast and do the dishes. And so but in the last couple of weeks I've come to light again, which has been fantastic. Listened to on the YouTube to the last Book Lovers Corners, thoroughly enjoyed it. Was fascinated by your very philosophical, in-depth conversation.
You must have been listening to a different program.
Yeah.
Well,
Q2 or something. Q1, yeah.
And so somewhere, and I can't remember who it was, somebody mentioned Gary Disher. So I have got a Gary Disher here. I've read, he started off with a Gary Disher Consolation. That's his most recent one. There are two of them. He's written a whole lot, but these are two of a new sort of genre. Set, the first one was Peace. They were set in a rural, I think, South Australian sort of township area, and the protagonist is a policeman who was in fact a investigative officer in a big city crime busting unit.
It's the classic setup of The Dry, isn't it? That's exactly.
Well, it's a similar sort of thing. You've got corruption and so on in the unit that he was in, which he then exposed, and of course was luckily to survive exposing his crime mates, and got posted down as a policeman in this rural hinterland of South Australia.
Well, why is it Australian police always seem to be corrupt and sort of...
there's a long...
It's history.
and glorious tradition of...
Yeah, absolutely. The facts are there. This is not...
No, so it just fits in with our view of Australia these days. Anyway, go on.
It's Australians' view of Australia as well, isn't it?
And so he's an ordinary policeman, but he has all this background and skills and knowledge and strategies, and so he's able to deal with all these odd things that crop up in a rural community, and he does it with great skill, and I just really enjoyed them. So I don't know which of the three of you, either you two or Sue, came up with Gary Disher, but I thank you, because I have really, really enjoyed that.
We sell a card in the shop, which I think probably fits in with that. It says, "There's not much to be seen in a small town, but what you hear makes up for it."
And what you don't see makes up for it, I would imagine, too. It's just, and coming from small town New Zealand myself, there is a lot that goes on that's, not obvious. I have also noted Michael's comment about having enjoyed the tally stick, and so I got round to reading that, and this is where a car of a family who have just arrived from UK, going on a Great South Island trip before he settles down to head office BP or something of that sort of ilk, and he keeps on driving when he in fact should have stopped, because he's not familiar with the roads and unsealed roads and bush and rain and everything. Goes off the road. He and his wife and the baby are killed, leaving 3 kids surviving. And so the story is what happens to these 3 kids. Well, they are saved by a bloke who was wandering along the beach, and thereby is the tale. They get secreted off to this settlement up the valley.
Doravale.
Not quite.
Not quite.
Okay. But not not.
There's a hint.
Not necessarily Gloria Vale, but there are plenty of those. And for me as a coaster, communities like that are up in the black box, in the bush, up the valleys, and they end up there. And
Great
so
premise.
the story is the tale of their life up there, and their quote rescue or not unquote.
So that was on our bestseller list for a long time.
Yeah, and Carl Nixon, who wrote it, was actually here at the Readers and Writers last year, and I remember going and seeing him at Headley's.
So it deserves a readership. It's
absolutely,
that good, yeah.
And it's got Michael's seal of approval.
Well, there we go.
I've also still got Becky Manawatu's Alway, which I gather is walking out the door at Elmo's.
The Bateman's rep who distributed it for Macaro, who published it, was in this morning, and I ordered some more for about the 15th time, I think. They've reprinted it with a different colour, and he said that the sales continue to increase, so it was easily New Zealand's best-selling novel last year.
Well, in fact, I've been looking at, the top 10 books in the Dom Post for the last umpteen weeks, and it's been in the top 10 for quite some time.
I like the story I read about the bookshop in Greymouth or something, and the rep came in with the book right when it was really new, and he said he would take 2 copies.
That's brave.
Yeah, that would be Greymouth.
And then he last hearing he'd sold 400 copies. So
Yeah.
I mean, obviously it's found its readership, and it's now probably the most talked about book of 2020.
But it's one of those books, get one of them every now and then, where a lot of the people that you sell it to come back and say that, that was really well worth reading. Not everybody says they thought it was fun. But tough.
I wouldn't have said it was fun. I'm really finding it hard to sort of. I love the writing,
Yeah.
but the story, having spent all the decades as a teacher of secondary school age kids with issues, I just found that too reminiscent, really. But I'll get there. It is in the pile. The other one I have looked at was Rosalie Ham's Dressmaker's Secret, which Sue recommended. And those of you who've read The Dressmaker and have seen the film, this one is just a continuation of Tilly's life, but it, as you I think mentioned when Sue brought it up, it is made for film, and you can see it absolutely. So let's hope that there is somebody's got their got an idea of making that.
Oh, I'm sure. I mean, The Dressmaker was a successful movie.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
So another successful book by Rosalie Ham. I've also, keeping up with the Australian theme with Gary Disher and Rosalie Ham, I've read the latest Di Morrissey, which is Before the Storm, and again, like Gary Disher and Rosalie Ham, they're focused in this particular case in a small rural community where you've got the wealthy landowners and you've got the ordinary people of the town setting out to make things work, and the wealthy people, dysfunctional son wants to make money by selling off some of the land that belongs to the family, which he has no right to get development and get money in for himself. And so I found that a very engaging and quick read. I always enjoy Di Morrissey, and it surfaces issues that are current in small places in both New Zealand and Australia, I think. But finally, quickly, I want to mention the book today, Lamorna Ash, Dark Salt Clear. Dark Salt Clear, Lamorna Ash. It's a young woman, still in her 20s, got sick of London life, went down to Cornwall where she has got family connections, and has got stuck into the community and got into fishing, has written a book, Dark Salt Clear, Life in a Cornish Fishing Town, and it is in fact the town of Newlyn. And quite coincidentally, I got a calendar yesterday from a friend in UK out of lockdown, and it's of Cornwall, and that was a Newlyn Harbour where the book is based. So that's quite coincidental.
I think serendipitous.
Serendipitous, yes, I'd agree.
Lucky.
Lucky. But she not only just sort of lives in the community there, she actually goes out on fishing boats. She goes out for day fishing, and she goes out for a whole week on fishing boats. She learns how to fish. She learns how to gut, how to fillet, how to pack. Just an amazing, for a young woman in her 20s to take on that as part of the research for her book was awe-inspiring. And she has a lot to say about the village itself, or the town itself, the people and the varieties of people, the history and of fishing, and it's UK's biggest fishing port. And, you know, there are a whole lot of issues about the sustainability of fishing these days.
Well,
and
They'll be okay now. They've stolen all their fish back from the French. haven't
well,
Exactly, they've got that sorted.
but she goes also into the landscape and looks at the geology and gets experts about the art scene and talks to experts in the various areas and puts together a really, really engaging, interesting read. And I was really quite fascinated. It was the BBC Radio 4 Book of the Week in 2020. William Dalrymple, who I've got a lot of respect for in his writing, says that Lamorna Ash marks the birth of a new star of non-fiction, which I think is high praise from someone of his writing ability. So I do recommend Dark Salt Clear, Life in a Cornish Fishing Village by Lamorna Ash. And Lamorna Ash, the name Lamorna, she's named after a cove down Newlyn. And so her name is, linked to Cornwall very definitely. Absolutely fascinating.
I'm curious to see if a book like that would get out into the world.
Well, it's in Carterton Library.
Well, it got here.
Well, exactly. As far as I know, we're in the world.
We're in the world, but
And we're about as far away from its origins as you can get.
It's a challenging book. I mean, it really is. It's going to be the quality of the writing. Is going to make. I mean, obviously that sounds like it's of a high level, because it's just like I'm always curious about how these books. Why is there a? What's the bigger thing than just being a book about England and a little port and about the fishing thing? Why? How does it resonate with us?
Well, as she said, it's really interesting because she found in these. She'd go down there and spend some time and then go back to London, then go down and spend some time, probably connected with fishing seasons.
Yeah.
And quite intriguingly, she said, I found that physically I was back on the land after the fishing trip, but my head was still on the water. So she had some really, really interesting philosophical questions and thoughts about life, living in small communities, but life on the water, the life of fishermen, which is a very different sort of life from that on the land.
And us being islanders, that can work.
Yeah. See, I was just trying to think. It's Douglas Rebanks. He wrote that.
The country
book about farming in the Lake District.
Yep.
And then there's another one called English Pastoral or something. So and they've sold
really
pretty solidly.
Yep, absolutely.
So there's a niche, a little group of people who are into a book, a non-fiction book with some insights about life. And
life and nature and people and.
Well, you see, and that's I'm part of that niche market.
Over here, it's really historical crime, isn't it?
You can have your historical crime.
We're doing historical crime this month.
Yeah, that's our thing.
That really has been a thread. So perhaps we could again go through the book, starting with you, Steve.
So how long have we got, Valda?
We've got 4 minutes.
Okay, there's just a couple of things I'd just like to mention. Wairarapa Word that I'm involved in.
Oh, yes.
So the next event is the 7th of March. Tom Doig, who's written one of the Bridget Williams kind of texts, short book about climate change. We're holding that in the foyer of the event centre in Carterton, 3 o'clock on Sunday, and we're expecting a pretty solid turnout. He's really a journalist rather than a scientist, working at Massey, but
I might be able to make it this time.
Yeah, we're expecting good things actually.
Good.
In terms of books, I briefly mentioned Edward Rutherford's China, which is coming up, and hopefully I'll get through the 700 dense pages.
Well, I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah. City of Vengeance, D.V. Bishop, the first of our historical crime novels set in Florence with a gay Jack Reacher protagonist. Sue talked about the Jane Smiley book, which name I can't remember, but
Jane Smiley's book was The Strays of Paris.
Strays of Paris, about the horse in the first person, but also Kristen Hanna's novel about the Dust Bowl and the trip to California, Four Winds, and she also mentioned the Kingmaker series by Toby Clements, which are about the Wars of the Roses.
And I had a look at The Dark is Light Enough, a story of Ralph Hottery by Vincent O'Sullivan, a biography, and a big fun combination book of mystery and disaster. Stuart Thurton's The Devil in the Dark Water.
And I mentioned books that had been mentioned in previous Book Lovers Corner, but the one I focused on was Dark Salt Clear by Lamorna Ash, which is Life in a Cornish Fishing Village. So, have we got anything else to say?
I'm sure we've got lots of things to say.
Well, lots of things to say.
Have we got more time? Or
we've got... Well, I think probably this is... we might finish there, but perhaps next time you will have talked about Becky Manawatu's Awe at your book group. I might have finally read it. Have you read it, Steve?
I haven't got to the end of it, but I say that about a lot of books.
So maybe next time that would be on our agenda. So thank you, Gareth. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Sue. And we look forward to seeing you next month in March. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Valda. Good to have you back.
Great to be back.